Welcome to Comm Speaks, a podcast series produced by the Department of Communication Studies at Tarleton State University. On today's episode, we celebrate the department's 15th anniversary. You'll hear about what was, what is, and what will be concerning communication studies at Tarleton State as faculty, friends, and students celebrate our 15-year journey of excellence. From our studios here in Stephenville, Texas, here's your host, Dr. Tracy Holly.
This is Tracy Holly here with our inaugural podcast for the 15th anniversary of the Department of Communication Studies. And what we're going to do this semester and throughout the year is get to know some of our faculty members a little better and on more than just the academic level. And starting us off is Dr. Jennifer Edwards. And I'm not going to do an introduction because the questions will kind of pull that out.
Sounds great.
So this is our 15th year, Dr. Edwards. So I thought I would ask, first of all, how long have you been with the department?
You know, I have been with the department since, August of 2007. It's been a great journey so far.
Oh, wow. Okay. So were we in Davis Hall when you joined us?
Yeah, we were in Davis Hall. I actually had my interview in Davis Hall. I remember coming up to the stairs and being in the break room, and it was interesting. My interview was in the break room, and I saw all of the duct work that was there from the construction, because that was when I guess the department first moved into Davis Hall.
Right. And I remember your teach. We did go over to the Fine Arts Building for that.
Yes.
I remember how enthusiastic you were. I remember that.
Yes,
very
and
much.
The students were amazing, and I mean, it was a great. Stephenville was a great community. I moved here from Huntsville. I was working at St. Houston State, so it was almost a mirror of Huntsville with, minus the facilities, of course.
Right, yeah. So thinking about Davis Hall, I always ask people, do you have any specific memory of Davis Hall? Because it was a very unusual way to have faculty arranged. I was on the top floor eventually. I started in the bottom floor in a cubbyhole no one could find. And we were split between first floor, I think third floor, and first floor, second floor, and fourth floor.
Yeah.
Where were you?
I was actually on the second floor, so every day I started walking up steps, because obviously the elevator in Davis Hall was not the best, and so I just wanted to avoid the elevator at all costs. But I was in the middle of the second floor, and I was actually up there with some grantees from the College of Education. So it was great getting to know them. They were amazing, and so they were my colleagues. And then down the hallway I had Dr. Wakefield as well as Dr. Horton. So it was I think we were the only ones down there. And then Dr. Maven then joined us downstairs. But it was a great team, especially starting out first year in the department.
Yeah. And you were right about that elevator. I did get stuck on it once. So you were so smart. But I didn't want to take the stairs to the fourth floor.
Well, and then also it was interesting, but there was always something interesting in the stairwell. And so I would say on the left-hand side, when you would come up the stairs, there would be this gummy bear. I think it was a green gummy bear, and it was stuck there for about 2 years, and no one wanted to remove it from the door, but it was a green gummy bear. So that was something that, I always look for the little things to kind of brighten my day. And I thought I was the only one who saw it until the students started mentioning, hey, did you see that gummy bear? And it became like this conversation in class.
Yeah, we have these little things about Davis Hall we remember, and mine is the office next to me, which was Dr. Milford before me, and then Dr. Goen moved in. I started walking in her office one day, and I kept going down. No matter what angle, I would slope to the middle.
Yeah.
And we found out there was old drain closed up under there, because that had been a men's dormitory.
Yeah.
And that's where the shower was.
You know what? Davis Hall had its quirks. I mean, definitely so.
Yeah.
Definitely so.
Okay. But you took a journey through that here, and you've gone through several phases where you've been here full-time. And tell us a little bit about when you left full-time and then have come. Are you back full-time completely? Because not really.
That's debatable. It depends on the day. So basically, in 2012, after I had my baby, I started basically serving as assistant vice president over student success and multicultural initiatives. Worked with some amazing people, but I loved it because it enabled me to keep a presence in communication studies as well as serve the entire university in that capacity. So I did that from 2012 to 2017, and so that was great. So I was excited to come back. I was asking to come back for a while, so it was exciting to come back to communication studies. I really at that time wanted to get into a lot of back into my writing, back into grant writing, and also back into like helping to serve the community, because I'm realizing, especially in our rural communities, and Stephenville is in fact in a rural community, it's important to make sure that our population has the same access to resources as people in Austin and Houston and Dallas and San Antonio.
Yeah. And speaking of rural community, one of your fields is one of your outside link to the university, I guess, developments.
Yeah.
Because I want to get away from academia for a while, is your rural communication. And I think that is so fascinating to me, because even though my parents took us into small towns to live,
Yeah.
all my grandparents, all my family, and when I was very little, it was all out learning how to can and quilt and do all these things. And we seemed to, for a long time, be losing a lot of that. So I wanted to see what you could tell us about your passion about rural communication and what you plan to do and what you hope comes out of that.
Sure. So the Rural Communication Institute was founded in 2019, and it became evident that there was not anything like that in, I will not say the state of Texas, but even beyond the state of Texas, in the nation. So most rural research actually stems from Asia, from Europe, from South America, from Canada, from Mexico. And it's very important that we also add to that conversation as well as individuals in the United States. And so we looked at some gaps that existed with the research, and also with connecting people to resources became one of our passion projects for RCI, or for the Rural Communication Institute. And so basically from that, we started writing a lot of grants. We started providing a lot of outreach for the community. We have a podcast. We have amazing grad students and undergrad students who are passionate about rural areas. Either they are from a rural area, or they have family members like their grandma, grandpa, etc., who live in a rural area. And so that is who we've attracted to this institute. It's amazing because we've been able to do such things as outreach in the community to help people health-wise. We have individuals that we're helping right now who live in an area that does not have access to running water. And so, they exist in Texas. And so helping connect them to state resources that can help facilitate either the digging of a water well, or connecting them to the community water system, which is a project in itself. But also our model and our goal is to help Texans, especially Texans, but even individuals beyond Texas, live, learn, and thrive. We have 15 rural scholars from across the nation, from California to New York, and so they are all passionate about rural communication.
That is fascinating. And I really wouldn't have thought that in 2021 we would have a place in Texas where that's not what we think of, unfortunately, that someone right here does not have running water in a community.
Yeah. So
no one has it.
No, they actually have water brought in through a truck. So a truck, like every month, will bring water, will fill the tank, and then they have that's how they get water, because on average it's about $15,000 to $20,000 to drill a water well.
Oh, so that is. Many years ago, I headed out into West Texas, far out in West Texas, and I will never forget, I was going with a friend to her hometown, and we passed a sign that said, "Water not approved for public consumption." And I had never seen anything like that. Like, I can't drink the water? And then I forgot about it, and I drank the water out of the sink, out of the faucet, and I was drinking it, and they came in and said, and I said, you know what? It's the best water I ever tasted. And I said, but then I drank from the wells. My grandparents had a pump well.
Yeah.
It wasn't in pipes yet.
Yeah.
And Heaven knows what I drink out of.
I mean, and who knows? I mean, that's why it's always important, and that's another piece to make sure that individuals in our rural areas know about things that could, help or potentially harm them health-wise, because
Right.
you never know what's in your water if you do not get it tested. And also, a lot of our rural residents are on septic systems, so to know the importance of making sure that you have your septic system a certain like away from your fruits and your vegetable plants and things of that nature, and to make sure that runoff will not affect your food supply.
Yeah.
But just, yeah, and also one thing I wanted to really emphasize is that many people associate rural with ag. And that's also part of our narrative as well. Rural does not necessarily mean ag. Rural can mean rural politics, rural community structures, rural outreach when it comes to childcare, and when it comes to education, when it comes to owning businesses, when it comes to almost anything in rural areas. It does not necessarily just mean ag. So that's part of our narrative as well.
And I'm glad you brought that up because when you said, we don't have rural communication until you started this institute here, it's an area we were ignoring. It seemed like the only research I ever read prior to that, was about water rights or peanuts.
Yes.
Or that's what rural research was. And it was very agrarian.
Yes.
And it's so much more, like you said, childcare, healthcare.
Yes.
So much more. And it sounds incredible. I can't wait to keep seeing where that goes and what comes out of that. And how can the community at large get involved in that if they're interested?
Yeah. Basically, we have the Texas Social Media Research Institute, and so that's what we're focused on for the fall semester when it comes to outreach and events. We have our podcast that we publish every week, so they can listen in to our podcast. Just search for Rural Communication Institute podcast, which is called Think Rural. So that is on Spotify as well as iTunes and other podcast platforms. And then also one thing that I do want to emphasize is that we met with our rural scholars, and we were going to have a rural week like we usually do in the fall semester, but they wanted something more. They wanted a summit, and they wanted something that would have a platform to make sure that their field, that our legislators and our community leaders could listen to it and become involved. And so they wanted to have an actual summit, and so we will have that in either, I think it's April of next year, so April 2022, and everyone can get involved in that. So we're very excited about that.
Very excited about that. Okay, one other quick passion I want to let you talk about a little bit before we wrap it up is I know I actually did the census because you kept saying, do the
Thank
census,
you.
do the census, do the census. And I know that the census and not so much voting rights, so that is a huge part of it, but just having the ability to get there to vote, have all the pieces in place you need to vote are very important. Can you talk to that a little bit about what you hope to do with that in the future?
So regarding the census or regarding voting?
Voting.
So basically with the census, we discovered that many of our individuals in rural areas, sometimes we don't necessarily get involved. As we were taught in school, like, get involved, political participation is great. And then you get into your jobs, you get into the bill paying every month, and that fire is lost. And we want to reinvigorate that fire when it comes to political participation, especially in rural areas. So that means, hey, take the census. That means go to your county commissioners meeting, go to your city government meeting, think about running for office, but also most importantly, take the census and vote. And one thing that I emphasize to the rural individuals in rural areas is, if you do not take the census, there's no record of you living in that place when it comes to 100, 200 years from now. Because if you think about it, many of our rural people, and people from every sector of the U.S., they do ancestry research. So that's the only way that they're able to find their people. And it's important to know your people. So with that, voting is very important as well as part of that political participation, because when you do not vote, I tell people, when you do not vote, when you do not go to the poll and cast your vote, you literally don't have a say when it comes to the items that go on in your community. So voting is very important because you're voting for those leaders, you're voting for your issues. And so especially with our rural residents, they have the ability to get to know the people that they're voting for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People don't realize your voting can impact everything from will you have parking meters
Yes.
to who goes on the ballot for the legislature.
Yes.
It's every little thing to every big thing, and I think we do often let that slip up in our everyday minutia, that we forget that we think about the presidential election, but we forget there's a school board election.
Oh,
There's what is this about a new tax we might put? We forget
Or if
that.
taxes increase. People always complain if taxes increase, but did you go to the board meeting to hear about the pros and cons of that tax increase or keeping it the same? But also, there's so many things coming down the pipeline when it comes to voting, especially those affect our rural areas. A lot of people in our rural areas have to work Monday through Friday. Many of them work in factories. Many of them work at chicken processing plants and or other types of factories in rural areas. But those are not all the occupations. But even if you think about our teachers are typically working from 7 until sometimes 6 when it comes to their duties for their school district. So having time to go to the polls to vote is very important. However, sometimes you can't just leave your classroom to go cast your vote. Sometimes you just can't leave the chicken processing line to go cast your vote. So it's important to make sure that people have different options when it comes to voting. But also with our rural residents, it's important that they know what the rules are before voting time comes around.
And even backing up from that, I have been reading just constantly about the voter ID and how it really impacts certain populations more than others. And I thought, well, wait, I know Georgia does a free, and my friend said, let's back it up, Tracy. Let's think about this. In order to get any kind of ID to vote, even the free ones, you have to provide a birth certificate or some other proof of citizenship. Well, that means you have to stop, write for that, pay for that, and that's a burden on some people.
Yes.
Often take off work, drive to the courthouse because 5 times and they still have not sent you that person.
Yes.
So the burden starts way back of getting, especially in the rural communities, as you said, just getting the ID in place and then worrying about getting to a way to get to a poll to vote. So it really backs up all the way.
Well, and then also one thing that I discovered, I had to recently request a copy of my birth certificate, and one thing that was interesting is that you can only request your birth certificate, I think, 5 times.
I did not know that.
In Texas.
After that, do you just not exist anymore?
Well, I'm not sure what they do, but they said that you can, I think it's only 5 times. You can request it only 5 times. So use that sparingly. So if your mom and dad or grandpa or whoever misplaced it and you maybe misplaced yours, then what happens, so say if there was a a fire or something, or emergency or a tornado or whatever, and you lose that if you're in a high risk area of Texas, what happens? So that's also one thing to keep in mind as well.
And you also mentioned that census for finding out who your people are.
Yeah.
Because something I tell college students is, does your family trace its history? I know you've done a lot of genealogical, know the history of your family in Texas.
Most of
and even
they're
before.
from rural areas.
Yeah, my mother, yes, the rural people seem to be more knowledgeable about that. And so you can always, Grandma Exie can tell you when, But I always tell them, another reason it could be important is there are scholarships tied to some of that. And if you don't have the proof, you won't get one. They give scholarships for people whose family, you don't have to live there, but family was in so-and-so county from a certain date. And so those are really important in other aspects of life that we don't often think about.
Very much so.
Okay, I've got one last question for
you.
It's always the annoying question, but you have to wrap up. So my question is, so you've been here since 2007, everything you've done, everything you've gone through, everything you're developing, all your research and everything. You right now, if you could step back and talk to Dr. Jennifer Edwards in 2007. No, she said, please don't do this to me. What would you either A, do differently if you want to do that, or B, what advice would you give yourself?
I would, oh goodness, that is a question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would definitely tell myself to take a break. Sometimes, especially if you're on tenure track, or if you set goals for yourself, you're going from grad school to a certain position or whatever, and you haven't really had a break. And I've never had a break. And so that's one thing I would really tell myself: take a break. Breaks are important because when you do those, you can recharge and you can become your fully functional self. And so I would definitely tell myself from 2007 to make sure that you take a break so you can sit, reflect, and then move forward and charge.
Great. Well, Dr. Edwards, I want to thank you very much for being here today in our inaugural podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You will also be somewhere in the documentary that will be coming, so don't run away.
Oh, goodness. All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening.